Hello, so let us look at the second lesson on the circle geometry. In this case, what we're looking at, what we like to look at is the finding the measure of the angles that deals with chords and secant. For example, as we try to get started, let's try to look at one example here. Let's call this one as 2 now. And what if I were to assume that measure of this arc is 100 degrees, and measure of this arc, let us say, is, let's call that 70, and let us assume that this is A, this is B, and this is C. So my task for you will be to find the measures or the values of A, B, and C, where A, B, and C are the measures of the angle at these particular points. So how would you do it? Let me give you a little bit of time and then we'll talk about it together. Alright, so let us look at the first one first, A. When you look into A, you will be able to realize that A is the inscribed angle from intersected arc of the 70. That means A has to be equal to half of 70, which is equal to 35 degrees. Alright, how about B? B will be, once again, it will be an interior angle that comes from intersected arc of 100. Therefore, we can write B as half of 100, which is equal to 50. Then how about C? That's right. C, in fact, if you think about it, this angle is exterior angle of this triangle. So therefore, measure of angle C is in fact equal to A plus B, which will be equal to 85. Now, if you have number sense, you might have recognized something here. 70, 100, 85. Even if you didn't recognize it, that's perfectly fine. We'll look at something else on the next question. Having this one in mind, let's move on to the second question here. Angles formed by two intersecting chords. Now, I intentionally drew this line so that we can realize the relationship here. Then, what if I were to call this one as X? And measure of this arc as maybe A, measure of this arc as B. Then you will realize that this angle will be B over 2. Why? Because that's the inscribed angle from intersected arc B. And this will be A over 2. Because once again, that's the inscribed angle from measure of arc A. Then how do you figure out the X? Yes, you will realize that X must be equal to, since X is the exterior angle, sum of the two remote angles, here we get to realize A over 2 plus B over 2, which is equal to A plus B over 2. That's right. In fact, this seems to be the formula. Alright, then wait a minute. Let's try to move on to the previous question, see if this method would have worked. That's right. If you have to realize that 80 and 100, if you add up 100 plus 70, in fact, 70 and 100 over 2, is that in fact equal to 85? Yes, it is. Then how about the next question? What if I were to intentionally mention that, hey, measure of this arc is 120. And I say, this angle looks like 90. Then what will be the measure of this arc? Now, I want you to think about this question just a little bit. And based upon the previous relationships, how can you conclude this? That's right. Don't get caught up with x here, as you can see. Here x is the angle that was formed by two chords. So then here you get to realize 90 then must be equal to sum of these two intercepted arcs, 120 plus x over 2. That's basically what we end up getting. If you have to cross multiply, we get to realize 180 is equal to 120 plus x. Then by subtracting 120 from each side, x must be equal to 60 degrees. That becomes our final answer. All right. So if you have to summarize, if I call this one as x and b, what we'll end up getting is x equals a plus b over 2. That is the so-called relationship or formula, however you like to look at it. All right, next question. In this case, my focus here is on not on chords, but rather on secant. But in order for us to figure this relationship out, I'm going to give you one question first. So maybe I could assume this one as a second do now, maybe. And I'll say this one is, let's call this one as maybe 130 degrees. And this one looks like, let us say this is 40. From here to here. And from all the way over here to down here. Measure of the arcs are given in this way. Now what I want you to find is this. I want you to find this is A, this is B, and this is C. So find A, B, and C. In fact, finding A is not bad at all, because A is the inscribed angle opposite to 130, so we get to realize that A must be equal to 65 degrees. How about B? Yes, B is opposite from 40, so we get to realize that B must be equal to 20 degrees. But wait a minute, how about C? In order for us to look into this one, I was hoping that you could recognize another exterior angle relationship here. You see the triangle here. And if I have to extend this line, A is the exterior angle of that green triangle. So therefore, what we end up getting is this. A must be equal to B plus C. Then how do you figure out what C is? C is simply equal to A minus B. Then what is A minus B? 65 minus 20, which will be equal to 45 degrees. All right. And yes, in this case, we are trying to look at the second relationship. Angles formed by two intersecting secant. So let's call this one as X, because that's the angle formed by two secant lines. And what if we were to call this outer portion as A and then inner portion as B? Then what we like to do is we're going to be looking at the same way as before. First, the focal point on this one is I want to look at this triangle. The yellow triangle with extension here, so that therefore this becomes our exterior angle, which basically in fact equal to A over 2. Since this is B, we get to realize that this angle must be equal to B over 2. Then what's the relationship between A over 2 and B over 2 and X? Yes, since A over 2 is the exterior angle, we get to realize A over 2 must be equal to B over 2 plus X. Then the question is, how do you have what X is equal to? Just like earlier, how we subtracted the remaining value, what we can do is to keep C here, that's what happened. To keep X, we have to subtract by B over 2. Then X will be equal to A over 2 minus B over 2. If you combine them, that's equal to A minus B over 2. That becomes our second formula. Now, then in this case, the relationship would have been this, as we have done earlier. outer minus inner divided by, or outer minus inner between two secants divided by 2 will be the value of x. That means here, what if I were to call this portion as 120? And I'm going to call this one as 45. What is the value of x? Okay, why don't you try to work on this one? Alright, so one relationship which you can say is 120 minus 45 all over 2 will be equal to value of x. Then as you can see, this becomes 75 over 2 becomes the value of x. Alright, then let us move on to the next question. How about here? Same idea, outer minus inner divided by 2, but what if I were to say this time this portion is equal to, it looks like about 80 degrees. And I'll say this portion looks about the same. So, but why don't I call this one as maybe 75 degrees, just to make it a bit smaller. Then how do you figure out the value of x? Yes. So if I were to call this portion as a, you get to realize that 80 plus 75 plus 80 plus a must be equal to 180. Because of the diameter that you see, anything above that will be the half the circle. Hence, when you add up 3 measures, it's got to equal to 180. Then, when you look into that, you will be able to see that a must be equal to 25. Then, using the value of a, we get to realize that x must be equal to 80 minus 25 over 2, which will be equal to 55 over 2 degrees. Alright, let us move on to the next question. Okay, notice that this line is a tangent. Same idea applies here, and then notice that this is the diameter here. And then what if I have to say this portion of the arc is, let us say 135 from here to here. And then I want you to figure out the value of x. How to find the value of x? In fact, since you know that one portion is 135, the other portion from here to here must be equal to 45 degrees. Hence making it into 180. Then x must be equal to 135 minus 45 divide the whole thing by 2. Same formula as before. Then what do we end up getting? Yes. Here once again we're going to have 90 over 2, which will be equal to 45 degrees. Alright, so how about this one? In this case, what if I were to say, I want you to find the measure of x here, while this angle looks like 40 degrees. How'd you do it? In fact, this we are still using the same strategy. Given that this portion is x, what is the other portion? It would have been equal to 180 minus x. Then, using the same formula, 40 must be equal to 180 minus x minus x. The first two terms from the first portion here. Subtracting x divided by 2 would have been 40 here. What is this equal to? That's equal to 180 minus 2x over 2 must be equal to 40. Then when you simplify 2 to all sides, it's going to be 90 minus x. So 90 minus x must be equal to 40. That means by adding x by subtracting 40, we get to realize that x must be equal to 50. Alright. How about this one? Yes. In fact, this will be the extension of the two secant lines. What if I have to say outer measures of the arc, measure of the arc would have been equal to, let us say, 290. And I want you to find out the x. How would you be able to find the x? First, knowing that one side of the circle is 290, then what would be the measure of the other side? Yes, in fact, it would be equal to 70. So that they add up to 360. Then x once again will be equal to 290 minus 70 over 2, which will be equal to 220 over 2, which is equal to 110. Alright, that becomes our answer for the value of x. Alright, how about next one? Let me make it a little bit different from the previous one here. What if I were to say, instead of having x over here, what if I were to say x is equal to right over here? And I'll say this measure of the arc was 70 degrees. Then what do? To find out the other measure, is since this is x, this must be 360 minus x. How about that? And bring all these things together, you get to realize 70 must be equal to 360 minus x over 2. That is what we're looking at here. We have 360 minus 2x over 2. This becomes 180 minus x. That has to be equal to 70. Then what is that equal to? 70 is equal to 180 minus x, and then therefore x must be equal to 180 minus 70, which is 110. The value of x would have been equal to 110. Alright, that's it. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.